Welcome to the Cafe Culture podcast, a season of discussions on culture, politics, philosophy and science.
At a talk recorded on the 21st of September 2015, Dan O'Connor and Neil Sheerin discussed donors, money and body parts.
Hello, Newcastle. Thank you, Erica, for the invitation, and thank you to whoever designed this room for making these lights precisely my height, which is marvellous. I'm going to come on to some of the points that Neil made later on in my talk, particularly around the idea of commercialisation. And with very good reason, Neil cast commercialisation there as the sort of a moral bad in some ways. And yet here we are in a cafe buying wine in a commercial sense. Wine is not a kidney. You should all know that. Wine is not good for your kidneys either, probably. But we are in a world where commercial things happen. So I'm going to come to the idea of why commercialisation is something that we're uncomfortable with when it comes to body parts. But as Erica said, I'm going to talk a little bit more generally about some of the cultural issues that strike us when we talk about donation. And try to get to the heart of that question that Neil highlighted at the beginning. Why aren't there enough donors? Why aren't all of us in here registered donors? Why aren't all of us, when a loved one dies, ready to allow that? What are the cultural issues that come from that? So 3 scenes from not just the organ trade, but from the donation and selling of human body parts. I live in Brixton in South London, which some of you may know has a large Afro-Caribbean population. And there are several cosmetic and wig or weave stores in Brixton. And one of them has a huge sign that says 100% natural human hair weaves, which is a wig. And I walk past this almost every day on my way to Brixton Tube Station. And I'm always fascinated. Who is donating this hair for these wigs? And then it strikes me, of course, no one is donating their hair for wigs. They are being sold. So I wandered in with one of my friends one day and asked, and we were allowed to look at the labels. It's not on the labels where it's from, it just says 100% human hair. We asked the shop owner, she says it's all from Eastern Europe. It's from women in the Ukraine, in Uzbekistan, in the former Soviet states, who know that they can very easily and reasonably profitably sell their hair on to British women for wigs. Not the same as selling a kidney, but we're all kind of comfortable, are we, with the idea that there are women in Eastern Europe selling their hair. Very few women in South London are selling their hair as a way of making a living. And that begins to get to that idea of who are the donors and why would someone be inspired or motivated to sell a part of their body. Scene number 2. Some of you may have seen this in the news over the past couple of weeks. There is a sperm shortage, ladies and gentlemen. We have the National Sperm Bank in the UK. And gentlemen, not enough of us are giving a helping hand, for want of a much better term than helping hand for that. Are we not being incentivized enough, gentlemen? I ask ourselves, why are we not donating or giving our sperm to that? Do we need cash in hand to donate sperm? What is stopping people from doing that? And finally, Erica mentioned that I used to work at Johns Hopkins University. Some of you meant Johns Hopkins is one of the world's leading hospitals, one of the best research and experimental hospitals in the world, and has led the way in experimental and sort of edgy surgeries. And I got an email a couple of months ago that just said penis transplant. And I thought, well, they've looked into my internet history, haven't they? And I thought it was just one of those things, you know, with strange capitalizations, selling you things and sort of Viagra style stuff. It wasn't. It was actually from a colleague at Johns Hopkins. Johns Hopkins is going to do the first penis transplant from a dead donor, obviously, can anyone guess to who the recipient of this genital transplant is going to be? No. No. It's a veteran, indeed. It's a soldier who has lost his genitalia in the war in Iraq. Okay? And this provides, far more so than losing a limb, huge psychological damage to these chaps. And it's much more common than we imagine. If any of you know the history of plastic surgery, most of it the innovations emerge in World War I, when we first have shrapnel bombs. And that's where the plastic surgery innovations comes, including the first penis restoration surgeries by Sir Harold Gillies. So this is new again. That person has not, obviously no one is being paid to donate that. We don't know the story of the family whose body is the loved one who's being used to donate, whose genitals being used to donate. But there's a fascinating story about what's not on the table, as it were, when it comes to body parts, pieces of the human body, bodily fluids being donated. There is a hierarchy of value as well when we think about body parts. Who's donated blood recently? Oh dear. Is it because the biscuits aren't good enough that they give you? Is that? Do we need better biscuits in the? So you don't get paid for donating blood, but you do get a biscuit and a cup of tea and a sense of moral superiority as you leave the room. Certainly, as you leave this room, the three of you who put your hand up. When it comes to reproductive human tissue, human products, women get paid a considerably larger amount for their eggs, if you want to donate an eggs, than men if they wish to donate their sperm. It's a question of scarcity, it's a question of supply and demand. It's a real sort of free market thing there. So some things are more valuable, we just sort of intrinsically get it. Some things we think should be free. So why do we think blood should be something we donate for free when sperm and eggs are not something that we should donate for free? It's because, I think, and this gets to the cultural issues, that we assume that blood is going to be used to heal someone, whereas we assume that sperm and eggs are not going to be necessarily used to heal someone, but to do something very beneficial, of course, for that family, help them have the child that they desperately want but can't have, but that's not actually a life-threatening situation, right? But the blood may be used in an emergency situation, in an operation, the sorts of things. So we think that when we're saving someone's life, to benefit from saving someone's life by being paid for the blood seems unseemly somehow. And yet, who here works at the hospital? Anyone who works at the Newcastle hospital? 1, 2, 3. Do any of you work for free when you're saving lives? Yeah, that question's easier at Johns Hopkins University, where all the surgeons are multimillionaires, but we pay people to save lives all the time. So why don't we pay people to give their blood? What is it about that action that is different from the brilliant technical skills of nurses, doctors, surgeons, etc.? Why is that act of work, giving blood, different to running an operation surgery? What is it about that that makes it different? These are not, I should say, questions to which I have the answer, but which I think we can talk about as we go on. Throughout all of the great talk we just heard, I kept coming back to this. Does anyone remember The West Wing, that political show in the States about the and they're trying to work out a line for the president to say about why you shouldn't legalize prostitution. And they can't do it, and they're banging their heads. It's 6 men sitting in a room trying to work out why you can't, what's the line for not banning prostitution, and they just keep saying, it's a free market, it's a free market. And it takes one of their female colleagues to come and say, no little girl ever grows up wanting to be a prostitute, right? And that's a really interesting line. Does anyone really want to grow up, does anyone in Pakistan grow up thinking, I am going to sell my kidney, that's going to be a career option for me, that's how I'm going to support my family? Because there's a tendency when we talk about organ donation and organ sales or reimbursement, we used a lot of interesting words there, when we really mean payment, paying someone, giving someone cash for their time, which is what we do when you work your jobs, right? We pay you for your time. We pay you for a particular skill set or a particular thing that you have that other people haven't got. In the case of those who are in your jobs, it's the particular skill set, the qualifications you have, the experience or the expertise. When it comes to someone with a particular kidney, the thing that we're paying for is the fact that that kidney is singular and is the only one that's going to work in that situation. But why is that? Why do we worry that that is different to paying someone for their expertise? We live in a free market dominated world. It dominates all our thinking. Sort of neoliberal post-1980s world where things are increasingly privatized. And it's very easy for us to assume that the natural order of things is the marketization of things, that selling things and then allowing people to do whatever they want with their body parts or whatever they want with their skill set is the natural order of things. And yet, when it comes to selling a kidney or selling other body parts, we draw back a little bit. And it's interesting for us to wonder why, in a very, very free market, we're still hesitant about giving people money for something incredibly rare and scarce, which is a kidney. And I think one of the reasons that we worry about paying people to donate kidneys or other rare and important body parts is that we might not actually be talking about paying them too much and incentivizing people who are in desperate poverty or people who have got in enormous debt. What we're worried about actually, because if they found a job that was really risky and we were willing to pay them a lot of money over a period of time, we'd kind of be okay with that, right? So why isn't donating a kidney a job like any other? Well, obviously you can only do it once. The second time doesn't work for you. That is not, it's not a reliable job plan. You can ask anyone. But it's also that we think this is a thing about, this is too much risk. What we're really worried about isn't incentivizing people who are poor. We're worried about incentivizing people to take a risk that they perhaps ought not to be taking. There's very little risk involved in donating blood. Very little risk involved in donating sperm. Very little difficulty in donating blood or donating sperm. When it comes to donating a kidney or donating an egg, there's a lot more expected of the donor, which is why we start to talk about reimbursement for time, energy, and expenses incurred, that sort of thing. So it's a real question of why we are worried about thinking of it as labour. And so to me, all this comes back to those women in Uzbekistan or Tajikistan or Ukraine growing their hair out over a year, cutting it off and selling it for the wigs in South London. What does it say about the people, no, so what does it say about the relationship between those of us in South London buying the wig and those of us in Uzbekistan selling the wig? Is it an uncomfortable imbalance of power? What does it suggest about the way we rely upon people to provide things that we think that we need? Is that why we pay them, so that that uncomfortableness is washed away in a sort of tide of money that allows it to be okay? Now, donating hair is very, very difficult, very, very different to donating a kidney for all the reasons I've talked about. But there's still a certain discomfort in the idea that someone is giving you something of them, of their physical person. Philosophy, which is part of my background as well as history, does not do well with human discomfort, with emotional discomfort, with that strange feeling that we have when we contemplate somebody else's body, and particularly the removal of someone else's body part and its donation or purchase to or by us. And so that's the question, why are we concerned about that? So think about those altruistic donors, and this is where we sort of, I'm going to bring my remarks to something of a close. Those altruistic donors that Keith mentioned, how weird would we think it was that someone just pitched up and said, I'm going to donate a kidney? Who here would do that, would do such a thing? I'm just going to donate a kidney, off. See, it doesn't seem to be, okay, 2 or 3 people. Well done, you people, good people. But the rest of us are sort of going, okay, strange. Because there's an automatic assumption that you are then, and this is the sort of dark side of gifting, that you are in hoc to that person, that you continue to owe that person something. And the altruistic gift that most of British law around donation, body part donation is based on, doesn't really engage with the idea that those of us who receive gifts, if you receive a gift, you often feel a debt towards the other person. So, which is why it tends to happen within family and friendship circles, because those debts are easily paid off later on through emotional ties, friendship ties, family ties, that's fine. But when it's a total stranger, the great debt that you would feel if someone suddenly paid off your student loan, who you'd never met, someone suddenly bought your car for you and let you keep it, paid off your mortgage, it would seem strange. We would wonder about their motivations, but we would also feel that they had something of ours then later on, and that is the relationship that we're still not yet comfortable with. So I'm going to finish with that question then of commercialization. Why don't we want to commercialize body parts? And is it okay for us just to say, actually, we don't want to live in a world where people and bits of them can be bought and sold? The goods that are available for sale in any given culture tell you a lot about the moral values of that culture. 300 years ago, you could buy people in America. You could buy slaves. That tells you an awful lot about that culture. I'm not going to be so vulgar as to compare organ sales to slavery, but the existence of organ sales in lawless parts of Pakistan or in parts of Thailand or in Venezuela tells you a lot, potentially, about the moral circumstance of those particular cultures. And are we shying away from dealing with the questions of regulation that we need to be more open about, to engage with that, because we simply don't want to have anything to do with the moral culture in which bits of people are for sale to the highest bidder? that's where I'm going to stop. Thank you.
Cafe Culture North East is supported by Newcastle University, Peels and Dance City. We're also supported by DC Cafe, who host the events.